Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret stories and little-known details about your favorite music, movies, TV shows, and more. We are your Bostonians of behind-the-scenes drama, your Carlton Fisks of facts, your janitors of just really good anecdotes, here to explore the little idiosyncrasies that make up our pop cultural landscape. My name is Jordan Runtagh.
And I'm Gordon Wood. No, I'm Alex Heigl.
And today we are diving deep into Good Will Hunting, a movie near and dear to my heart as a native Boston kid. But before we go any further, I want to pause for a moment to recognize a milestone and take care of a little housekeeping. This is our 100th episode, which seems simultaneously very hard to believe and also very easy to believe. What do you think, Heigl?
I agree. Well, time has lost all meaning since 2020, but yeah, I mean, what is time anymore between other than the periods of wakefulness that are occasionally marked by dinner? But yeah, I'm duly honored.
I mean, here's a time stat. I think it would take, because I haven't crunched the numbers exactly, but I think it would take a week without sleep to listen to all of the episodes we've done so far.
Oh.
Without sleep is sort of a very common theme in the TMI story, I have to say.
Yeah, especially when we're doing 3 of these a week.
Yeah, that was not great. In any event, folks, we both want to thank you for spending this time with us so far, and to everyone who has reached out and said kind words to us or left reviews. It touches us in a way that I can hardly describe. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I am just so grateful to all these new friends and just to all who've listened. I mean, the gift of your time is so precious. So I hope you continue to enjoy, though slightly less frequently. For the foreseeable future, we're going to be moving to 1 episode a week rather than 2. You may have noticed in the last couple months, the releases were a little less consistent. To borrow a phrase from today's topic, it's not your fault. The power...
Don't do that.
Not you. The powers that be at iHeart have some other projects that they want us working on, and it came to everyone's attention that we do better work when we are able to sleep. So let me just level with everybody for a moment. The kind folks at iHeart initially wanted this show to be about 15 to 20 minutes an episode, which is why we were doing 3 of these a week when we first started.
Were we ever so young?
Yeah, it never. I think the shortest we ever got was maybe 40 minutes. So very quickly within the first couple months, they realized that these were going to run long, and so we cut it down to 2 episodes a week to save our sanity. So now we're going to go to 1. But hey, if you want more TMI, it really helps to do all the usual things that podcast hosts are always telling you to do. Leave a review or a star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just tell a friend about us. The more listeners we have, the more friends we have, the longer we can keep this going. But here's to 100 more episodes. Thank you all so much for all the kind words and just being along with us for this ride. It's been so much fun.
What he said. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know you were going to do this. I would have prepared remarks.
I'm sorry.
This wasn't in the document when I looked at it earlier. You son of a...
You're better off the dome anyway.
Runtagh. Yeah, I mean, I hear from most people on Twitter, and it's such a delight to have people reach out and like kind of our mission statement where we were talking about just getting people excited about stuff. It's such a hearing people's anecdotes about like, oh, I remember that, and like this is so cool, and did you know this, and just people engaging with us is so. It's been such a kind of welcome inversion of most of my career, which was to write a lot and things that did a lot of traffic, but I rarely heard from people about them. Like,
unless you got something wrong, in which case you just get a nasty. Exactly.
Yeah, usually from Harvey Weinstein's rep.
Oh,
yeah,
on brand for today.
Harvey, Sean Penn,
Scientology.
Scientology. Is my NDA up? Can I talk about any of that stuff yet? Anyway, yeah, everyone's been so nice on Twitter, and it's great reading the reviews, and honestly, I just get to hang out with Jordan every week, and having people say nice things about it, and all of the bits, all my silly little bits and impressions. It's really just the cherry on top. So yeah, thank you everyone. 100 episodes.
Good Lord. In a way, it's very fitting that we're doing Good Will Hunting today as a story about friendship. It's a story that explores elements of male friendship that I think often go unspoken, fears, heartbreak, hopes, weaknesses, loss, ambition, dreams, and family. So in a way, it's a perfect celebration of what you and I share, Heigl.
And earlier this morning, we had a conversation about a guy in a hardcore band delivering a monologue about manually masturbating horses on stage. So you can take that out if you want.
Remember when I said it goes unspoken? That continues to go unspoken. Anyhow, back to the topic at hand, Good Will Hunting. If you were born in the Boston metro area, there are two things that you're hardwired to be intensely proud of: the Red Sox and Good Will Hunting, or specifically Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. They are just the pinnacle of the local boys made good, and their personal story, at least to me as a Boston kid, is better than any Hollywood drama. And their real life story to me is inextricably linked with the touching friendship at the heart of their movie. It's just so good. It's romantic in every sense of the word, and it's filled with this wonderful redemptive arc. And I personally was surrounded by a group of very artistically minded, showbiz hopeful kids at my high school. So the story of these two childhood friends making it all the way to Hollywood and the Oscars gave us something to shoot for, which was really special as a high schooler. So, but more than just that, this movie has incredible performances by Robin Williams and Minnie Driver, gorgeous songs by Elliott Smith, and wonderful understated direction by Gus Van Sant, taking him from the art house to the mainstream. You have stirring, dramatic speeches, endlessly quotable moments. I love it. Heigl, what do you think of Good Will Hunting?
I didn't come to this movie until later, but the biggest thing I took away from it was Elliott Smith.
Yeah. Not the accents?
Like, I don't... Well, yeah, the accents, but no, my Boston accent didn't really crystallize until I saw The Departed.
My boy's wicked smart. I can't do a Boston accent to save my life.
It's funny, yeah, it's funny because despite watching a good number of movies set in Boston with like really honking Boston accents, it's mostly just The Departed.
Well, wait, what's the other one that Leo was in? I'm a duly appointed federal marshal.
It's not Shutter Island, is it?
Oh, it is Shutter Island. Okay.
All I can think of is, I mean, it's either Departed or it's
Mayor Quimby from me.
Yeah. Say chowder.
It's so, I mean, I guess we'll talk about this. Like, I grew up farther enough west that it was unusual when I would hear that. Like, it was not something that was ever like normalized to me, and I would always privately be like,
yeah, I mean, I never got the Pittsburgh or the Philly accent until I went to those places.
What's the Pittsburgh? I know Philly.
Downtown, gonna go downtown, get some pop. It's almost Midwest. It's like flat Midwest. If you're going downtown to the creek, it's almost like Chicago Midwest.
Oh, with a little bit of Philly. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I can kind of hear it now.
Although, I mean, this movie does have just like a number of hilarious, like all the quotable stuff. The script is obviously great, but yeah, my buddies in college, I used to do the like when they go to have like the fight, and Casey Affleck is in like the back seat, and he doesn't want to give. He just goes, "But we got snacks." That just became like a running bit with us. It was just, and anytime anyone wanted to do something, food came first. But we got snacks. Yeah, I mean, this movie introduced me to Elliott Smith, who's one of my favorite songwriters. I spent a lot of, I don't know if I want to say happy hours. Can you have happy hours listening to Elliott Smith? But certainly a lot of hours with that man's wonderful voice and his incredible artistry. And so if nothing else, I mean, the first time I ever saw him was in that awkward white suit at the Oscars.
Yeah.
And then when I finally saw the movie, I was like, oh, all these songs are incredible. What is this? And then a long period of staring moon-eyed out the window with
rain
2:45
falling on
a.m.
the window pane.
Yeah, pining.
Oh, that was your pining music? Oh yeah, my pining music was Ben Folds. The other good thing about this movie is that, I mean, it has Robin Williams doing his "It's Not Your Fault" line, which, I mean, Who doesn't want to have Robin Williams wrapping his arms around you, telling you that it's not your fault? Like, one of the most like affecting scenes, I think, of any movie that we've discussed. I mean, Robin Williams is basically the patron saint of TMI. I feel like we've talked about him in like 5 different movies.
He might be the honestly. I'm trying to think of if there's someone else has come up with so many great stories and just universal positivity. But
yeah, we should probably go easy on the Robin, but no, I don't want to.
No. Yeah, I mean, a more cynical view is this kind of where his maybe like a crinkly-eyed sincerity maybe started to get into Patch Adams territory, like maudlin, a little more the maudlin side, but it is so good.
Did I ever tell you my mom went to the Patch Adams premiere and met Robin Williams there?
No.
Yeah, they got they talked for a bit and they got a picture together and he signed her ticket to the premiere. And you know, I mean, for all of Robin Williams' comedic genius and many gifts, anybody who takes time to make your mom feel special, there's a special place in heaven for you, my dude. So I will always extra Robin cred for me. Yeah. Very cool guy.
Did she like the movie?
Anyhow, without further ado, I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay. I didn't mind Patch Adams. I saw it with a very forgiving eye because I was like, oh my God, I feel like connected to this. My mom went to the premiere.
Sure. I just remember Donner, Party of 50.
Yeah.
Having to have that joke explained to me.
So I take it doing Patch Adams on here is not going to fly.
No.
Anyhow, without further ado, from the location scouting trip that nearly got Robin Williams killed, to the early draft of the script that was a spy thriller, to the time Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt nearly played the leads, here is everything you didn't know about Good Will Hunting. The tale of Good Will Hunting kicks off with one of the most adorable origin stories in Hollywood history. It all began in my home city of Boston, Massachusetts. The state's name being an old Algonquin word meaning very hard to spell. Thank you. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck lived 2 blocks from one another in the Boston neighborhood of Cambridge, so close that Ben could see into Matt's bedroom from his own. Their moms were friends and introduced them when Matt was 10 and Ben was 8 years old, and they hit it off right away. Matt Damon later recalled the moment when he knew Ben was, quote, a good friend to have during a 2019 appearance on Conan O'Brien. Apparently, Ben came to his rescue during a fight. And the trouble began when Matt and a group of neighborhood kids went to play football on the Cambridge Common during a snow day at some point back in the mid-'80s. And Matt said, I mouthed off to a kid that I knew. He was like 6'6". I might have been 5'3" at the time. I'd scored on him or something. I don't know. I said something, but he came for me. And it was right then that little 5'2" Ben Affleck tackled this dude off me, like out of nowhere. I was a junior and he was a freshman, and he tackled this kid off me, literally at the risk of his own life. I remember that was a big moment. Like, this guy will put himself in a really bad spot for me. That's a good friend. I love that. Matt and Ben went to the same school, the interestingly named Cambridge Ringe and Latin School, where they bonded over a shared love of acting, which was very unusual for their peer group.
What is Ringe?
Ringe, I don't know. Ringe is a town in New Hampshire, but beyond that, I'm not sure what Ringe and Latin is.
You can't teach Ringe. You got to be born with it.
There's a lot of the public schools in Boston are the like Roxbury Latin. There's always Latin in the name for some reason. Never really understood that. Matt Damon's brother later told People magazine that Matt and Ben, quote, weren't heartthrobs by any means. They weren't even considered cool kids. They were drama geeks. And Ben later told Parade magazine that before he met Matt, acting was a solo activity where I'd just go off and do something, act in a little TV show or something, and no one understood it. All of a sudden, I have this friend, Matt, and he gets it, and he wants to do it, and he thinks it's interesting and wants to talk about it. So soon, both of us are doing it. And in fact, as teenagers in 1988, they actually both appeared as extras in the Fenway Park scene for the film Field of Dreams, which is interesting, thus cementing their lifelong association with the Boston Red Sox. And my favorite, is there a Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, like Bennifer equivalent? Bat? Call him Bat?
Afflin?
Matt and Ben. Matt doesn't really. I guess you have to say Ben and Matt. Yeah. My favorite Ben and Matt Red Sox story went down during the filming of Gone Girl, which was delayed significantly after director David Fincher wanted Ben Affleck's character to wear a hat with the New York Yankees logo, who are famously the Red Sox rivals, and Ben refused. And Ben later explained in an interview with the New York Times, I said, David, I love you. I would do anything for you, but I will not wear a Yankees hat. I just can't. I can't wear it because it's going to become a thing, David. I will never hear the end of it. I just can't do it. And I couldn't put it on my head. And Ben would characterize this tiff as, quote, a legitimate fight that resulted in a standoff between them that shut down production on Gone Girl for 4 days. The matter was solved ultimately with a Mets hat, which was deemed an appropriate compromise because everyone from Boston knows that Mets fans are secret Red Sox fans because they hate the Yankees just as much. But back to Matt and Ben's childhood friendship in the early 80s. At first, Ben, though younger, was the veteran performer. He was a child actor who'd appeared in a 1979 indie film called Dark End of the Street, which was directed by a family friend. And as a 7-year-old, he developed a crush on the 19-year-old playing his older sister, which I think has shades of the Brady Bunch in there. And as a 12-year-old, he appeared in the 1984 PBS educational series The Voyage of Mimi, and also a Burger King commercial, along with a few other odds and ends. And Ben introduced Matt to his agent, who took Matt on as a client, and Matt made his feature film debut in 1988's Mystic Pizza with a single line of dialogue as the little brother of the rich kid who's trying to date Julia Roberts. And as students, Matt and Ben would have what they referred to as, quote, business lunches in their high school cafeteria. And I find this adorable. They socked away money in a joint bank account to fund trips down to Manhattan for auditions. And hilariously, Ben would apparently sweet talk the teller at his local bank into withdrawing money from his college savings account that his mother had been depositing into, which is cute, but also seems like kind of illegal.
Yeah, maybe. Well, let's talk about Ben's upbringing for a second, because he was sort of on a socioeconomic fault line, which is a topic that gets explored in Good Will Hunting. According to Ben's father, the neighborhood where they grew up was, quote, kind of rough. His dad was an aspiring playwright who worked a series of odd jobs. He was a janitor at Harvard, funnily enough, but spent much of his free time backstage at the prestigious theater company of Boston. His mother was a Radcliffe-educated elementary school teacher who worked in the Boston public school system. So they were a very well-educated, intellectual, artistic family living in a neighborhood that didn't particularly encourage art. Harvard, MIT, they attract people who are able to pay the enormous tuition costs of those schools, but they are themselves located in the more working-class areas of Boston. Am I going to get hit with a brick for this, for reading? Jordan wrote this, not me.
No, I mean, the neighborhoods, I mean, like most neighborhoods in the Boston area and any urban center have been like increasingly more gentrified in the last, in the 25 years since Good Will Hunting came out in it, or 40 years since the Afflecks and the Damons were growing up there. But yeah, at the time, Cambridge was more of a working class place. And I think Matt would later say it caused a lot of friction with the kind of tweedy rich kids that would be coming in from out of state to go to these Ivy League schools.
And these feelings intensified and became even thornier in the late 80s when they both went off to college. Matt famously went to Harvard, whereas Ben went to the University of Vermont, dropping out after a single semester. And he has admitted feeling embarrassed about that. I mean, he later told Rolling Stone, "I've always been insecure because I only had a little bit of college and knew a lot of people from fancy schools. All that sort of resentment in Good Will Hunting about people who went to college came from me feeling on the fringe." One of the many articles you shared to me about this particular topic is the unbearable sadness of Ben Affleck at BuzzFeed by Anne Helen Peterson. And in that piece, she talks about the word fratty, something that has dogged Ben Affleck throughout his career. And she says that he always hated that because it pointed to a class level that he never achieved. Affleck later told The Talk, "The idea that I'm this frat guy is odd because I only went to college for one semester. I was never in a fraternity. It speaks to a kind of upper-class upbringing that I didn't have." Matt Damon has also had a lot to say about these complicated class dynamics, which is illustrated in a pretty screenwriting 101 way when Will and his buds literally fight guys from Harvard and MIT. In an interview with the journalist and critic Tom Schoen, he said, "I think for us, coming from Cambridge and living in a neighborhood that was very much dwarfed by Harvard and MIT, we would look at these other people, these students who came in every September, and think, it's our city, not yours. All of those issues were very much part of our lives and all the kids we knew and grew up with. And then I went to Harvard, and suddenly I was friends with all these people and not seeing them as some strongman antagonist. Perfectly wonderful people, too. So what does that mean? All that stuff bottled up in Good Will Hunting. Ben's father was a janitor at Harvard. In fact, his girlfriend at the time was the janitor in my dorm in my freshman year, which made it even more bizarre. So when on Friday nights the kid would get too drunk and throw up all over the place, I knew who was going to clean it up, and it was someone I considered a friend. That kind of shift came out, I think, in the soup of Good Will Hunting."
Interesting, right?
Yeah, it is. And in 2000, both of them, Ben and Matt, spoke at a rally in support of raising the living wage of campus employees. Affleck has also narrated a 2002 documentary called Occupation, which chronicled a sit-in organized by the Harvard Living Wage Campaign. And some some film scholars have likened the class conflicts in Good Will Hunting to the tensions between Catholics and Protestants in Boston and also Ireland. A piece published in 2012 in the Journal of Comparative Poetics claims that Will and his South Boston friends play the role of Irish Catholics, while the students at Harvard and MIT represent the English-bred upper-class Protestants. How do you feel about that? Who wrote that?
Probably guys that went to Harvard.
You know, I always think it's funny that Affleck grew up or was born in Berkeley, but I don't know that his...
He moved to Boston when he was like 3 or something. He was very young.
No, I thought he had like rich, like Mayflower family, but it was that show Finding Your Roots that he was on that he tried to pressure them into hiding the fact that his ancestors, some wing of his family were slave owners.
Oh, wow. Where does it say he pressured him?
It was an email that came under the Sony hack. WikiLeaks released them.
Oh my God.
The host of the show, Henry Louis Gates, was writing to the head of Sony Pictures, Michael Linton. He said, for the first time, one of our guests asked us to edit out something about one of his ancestors, the fact that he owned slaves. He literally said, "What do we do?" And Michael Linton was like, "You take it out of the segment."
I mean, did you read any of that BuzzFeed article I sent you?
I think I read it when I came out,
yeah.
But no, I didn't reread it today.
Talks a lot about how like Ben Affleck really had an uncomfortable relationship with his kind of working class upbringing and was sort of ashamed of it. And when he was dating J-Lo, it kind of came out because he was trying to like make her more, in quotes, respectable. And there were even rumors at the time that he like wanted to run for office. Yeah, it's a really interesting piece that gets into a lot of like nuances about his relationship to class and race in the case of J-Lo. It was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I just knew about a lot of his dad stuff, that his dad was like drank himself out of their home essentially and was homeless.
I didn't know he was homeless. I knew he moved up to like Ohio or somewhere in California.
Yeah. I mean, that was where he spent like 12 years getting sober, but before that he hit rock bottom on the actual streets of Cambridge.
Oh, Jesus, I didn't know that. Wow. Well, on the topic of highfalutin concepts and over-intellectualized papers like that weird Good Will Hunting are the Catholics and Protestants thing we just talked about, let's talk about Harvard. Ben Affleck did his one semester at the University of Vermont before dropping out and chasing fame in LA. And Matt almost completed his course of study at Harvard, but he dropped out in his last semester, just 12 credits shy of graduation, in order to also pursue film work. I think he was there for a total of 5 years because he took a sabbatical to take an acting gig in the movie School Ties, which starred Brendan Fraser and also featured Ben Affleck. But in Matt's fifth and final year at Harvard, he enrolled in a playwriting class, and as he later told Boston Magazine for the 2013 oral history of Good Will Hunting, the culmination of this playwriting class was to write a one-act play, and I just started writing a movie. So I handed the professor at the end of the semester a 40-odd page document and said, "Look, I might have failed your class, but this is the first act of something longer." And upon accepting the assignment, Damon's professor, Anthony Kubiak, was very impressed, later saying that the script was, quote, authentic and real. He added to Boston Magazine, "The thing that they always say when you submit a script to an agent is that they read the first page and they read the middle, and they can tell if they want to continue. They can see whether you can capture the human voice and dialogue, and that was all over this work." So Matt dropped out of Harvard after he got a role in the 1993 historical western Geronimo, an American Legend, which, despite featuring the likes of Robert Duvall and our beloved Gene Hackman, failed to make Matt Damon a star. And upon arriving in LA, Matt did the time-honored new to LA actor wannabe trope of crashing on his friend's floor, Ben Affleck's floor. But the roles for Matt were not exactly forthcoming. He got 2 bit parts in movies that also featured Ben Affleck, who had much bigger roles, parts in Glory Days and also the Kevin Smith movie Chasing Amy. More on Kevin Smith later. But Ben was doing, I think, marginally better than Ben because he had the lead role in Kevin Smith's 1995 movie Mallrats, and also, of course, Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. I didn't know this, but I recently learned that Ben Affleck beat out Vince Vaughn for his role as O'Banion, the school bully in Dazed and Confused. Yeah, I can see that, though. Well, throughout these professional dry spells, the 2 friends continued to flesh out the script that Matt had begun writing at Harvard. And they would later admit that they did it mostly in an effort to provide themselves with good material for an audition reel, which is pretty clever. Matt Damon later admitted on the Today Show, "The script really was born out of frustration with our unemployment, so we just wrote it pretty much out of desperation." And Ben elaborated, "The whole thing of Good Will Hunting was really just to make, at the time, a video cassette that was like an acting reel. Like, we can't get a job to show that we can do interesting stuff, so the whole thing was to have a reel and show casting directors. And so the idea was we'd write these parts for ourselves. That was our ambition. I think we were shocked that the movie even got released." It was like, no, we don't have to go to the big studios. We can do it cheaply and get a movie star, and we'll make it for $1 million, which is not a lot of money in the scheme of movies. So we wrote a movie that's just all interiors and people talking in rooms because it was inexpensive. And a lot of the scenes came about as Matt and Ben just improvising. And there were a lot of scenes where they just switched on a tape recorder and started riffing. And in this early stage, they thought that the professor character would be played by Morgan Freeman in their fantasy casting. And the psychologist character, who would later be Robin Williams, would be played by Robert De Niro. So they would do their best Morgan Freeman and Robert De Niro impressions into this tape player, which Ben Affleck later reflected was probably really embarrassing in that respect.
God, I hope those tapes are out there.
I know. This is some special feature. If you were a loved one. Matt Damon later told Film Scouts, "Eventually we maybe came up with a half-hour improv out of which we would have maybe 15 seconds that was actually good. And we'd play the tape back and say, yeah, that's it. That's the one. Write that down." And maybe a scene would come from that line. And then on the rare occasion that one of them would actually have an acting gig, they'd work out pages on the set and fax them back and forth to one another. But this was not the most efficient process. Remember when we talked about Mike Myers writing Austin Powers in like 3 weeks, or John Hughes writing Home Alone in something like 10 days? It wasn't like that for Good Will Hunting. Matt Damon later told Entertainment Tonight, "We didn't really understand structure, so we wrote thousands of pages. We'd be like, well, what if this happened? And then we just write different scenes. So we had all these disparate scenes, and then we kind of try to jam them together into something that looked like a movie." And that's part of the reason why this movie works so well as a collection of really memorable moments and scenes, you know, from the therapist remembering his late wife to the whole "how about them apples" scene, to the scene where Chucky tells Will that he'll kill him if he's still hanging around Southie in 20 years. These were 2 actors who were trying to write a bunch of really dramatic scenes to show off their acting chops for an audition reel. It makes a lot of sense that that was the genesis. Matt would admit that this very inefficient process put them off screenwriting for another 20 years because, quote, "we never thought we'd have the time." But what I think is a really cute aside, Matt described the script in the Boston Magazine Oral History as, quote, "the first thing we woke up thinking about and the last thing we thought about before going to bed."
The script in this early stage wasn't even called Good Will Hunting. We don't have a working title for it on file.
Yeah, I think that they have said in other interviews that they just couldn't come up with a title.
What would you pitch it? What would you pitch the
Them apples.
Good. I can't come up with a better one than that. We're not riffing. You won. Ben Affleck told Boston Magazine that they couldn't come up with a title. They were still stuck when it came time to shop the script around. And so instead, they thought of a title that was being used by a friend of theirs, a screenwriter named Derek Bridgman. He was writing his own script called Good Will Hunting about an African-American kid growing up in the Boston neighborhood of Roxbury. And Matt and Ben offered the guy 10 grand if they could sell their script to a studio using his title. And he agreed. And one of the first things that they did after selling their script was to write him a check. So they made good on it. And they also gave him a bit part in the movie as an MIT student who asks the professor Gerald Lambeau the question in class.
The Stellan Skarsgård character.
I get all of them confused. I just
Not
know
Peter Sarsgaard.
Yes.
Not the other. He's not related at all.
There's the hot one, and then
the hot one is his
Alex
son.
and
Alex
then
is Skarsgård.
the
Stellan
creepy
is his
one,
dad, I think.
and then the creepy one is Bill.
Oh,
And then there's
how.
two others. Yeah, the guy who was Pennywise in the most recent It.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's two others. Lo and I were just talking about this. I Googled them. There's like other Skarsgårds, younger ones.
Not to be confused with Sarsgaard, which I did for a long time.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
Yeah.
This has been your Swedish actor corner.
As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages. Somewhat famously, the original plot of the Good Will Hunting draft, the first one completed in 94, was considerably different than the, sensitive character study that we know today. It was a thriller about an errant math genius from the mean streets of Southie who was on the run from government agents who were trying to force him to work for them, harness his incredible mathematical mind to do evil government things. Which is funny because it's sort of born supremacy, and also
Yeah, seriously.
Affleck said it was this idea of the brilliant kid and his towny friends where he was special and the government wanted to get their mitts on him. And it had a very Beverly Hills Cop midnight run sensibility where the kids from Boston were giving the NSA the slip all the time. That sounds terrible.
Yeah. I think the only scene from that entire plot that remained was the bit where he's interviewing with the NSA and gives that whole monologue about how they're, a morally bankrupt organization.
The script, though, sparked a 4-day bidding war across multiple studios, and ultimately it was acquired by Castle Rock Entertainment, which has been co-founded by actor-director Rob Reiner, who directed When Harry Met Sally, Spinal Tap, The Princess Bride, A Few Good Men. He'd also done Stephen King adaptations. He'd done Misery and Stand By Me. Castle Rock is, in fact, named after the one of the prominent locations in the Stephen King universe.
Which itself, I think, was borrowed from Lord of the Flies, right?
I didn't know that.
This is elevating the sucks to your ass mark count in this episode to 1.
And considering Matt and Ben were then in their 20s, the $675,000 script fee that they picked up for it was quite the payday. Their credit was so bad at the time that they had trouble getting an apartment rented. And eventually they were reduced to bringing along a daily variety article and telling their landlord, "We don't have credit, but this is us. We're these guys.
We just got paid this. Look, it's in the paper."
And it worked because it was LA. Ben later said, "We thought it would take care of us for 20 years, so we rented nicer apartments and each bought Jeep Cherokees, and we were completely broke in a year."
It's a very Ben Affleck thing, is blowing his Good Will Hunting payday on a Jeep Grand Cherokee.
Well, he had other vices that we now know about.
Video games and Subway. That's what we'll talk about.
No, he's a gambling addict, right? I'm not making that up.
Was he an ad? I know we got thrown out of casinos for counting cards.
I mean, yeah. Well, I don't know. let's leave Ben Affleck alone.
You don't get thrown out of a casino if you're not good at it.
Well, I guess that's true. We can't hurt Ben Affleck any more than he does.
Oh.
Rob Reiner, who just from that short CV, you could infer clearly knows a thing or two about a movie that'll make a lot of money. And after reading an early version of Good Will Hunting, he got the sense that there were two movies struggling for the soul of Will. A political spy thriller plot and a smaller, more intimate story about a troubled young math genius, his relationship with his therapist. He left it to Matt and Ben to decide which angle to go with, and that has made all the difference.
I think he strongly encouraged them to go with like the psychologist angle.
I love that there's an alternate universe somewhere where they just became like meathead action guys because they pursued the lunkhead spy thriller movie.
I mean, Ben Affleck kind of did for a while, I feel like.
Yeah. It was really that
Daredevil?
Oh, God.
Pearl Harbor? Whatever the hell the Batman thing is?
Yeah. He makes weird choices, man. Oh my God, that Daredevil movie. Daredevil is one of my favorites. I remember seeing that and just being like, oh yeah, not the movie, the comics, but just being like, what possessed him to think he could do this? Alcohol? Anyway, so Matt and Ben took Reiner's advice. They cut all the spy stuff. And this was scary for them because it meant cutting about 60 pages or half of your average screenplay and sent them right back to the drawing board. And there have been persistent rumors suggesting that based on this origin story and their age at the time, that the depth and sensitivity of the Good Will Hunting screenplay indicated the hand of someone else.
More mature.
The name being floated would be William Goldman, iconic screenwriter William Goldman, who won an Academy Award for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men. He also wrote Marathon Man, Stepford Wives, Chaplin. He wrote Princess Bride and the adaptation for Misery, both of which were directed by Rob Reiner, so that you see where we're going with this. Reiner did ask Goldman to take a look at the script back when it had been a spy thriller, just to see what he thought of it. And Goldman's advice was apparently the same as Reiner's, which is ditch the spy angle. But for many years, people have
speculated,
floated this rumor, and he came out against it in his memoir, which is titled "Which Lie Did I Tell? Adventures in the Screen Trade."
That was like when I was in screenwriting school, that was like a Bible practically. They were always recommending that book to us. But yeah, for years, rumors persist to this day that he was quietly a script doctor and he punched up the script that these two kids from Boston made. In an early version of Good Will Hunting, Will is actually a physics genius and not a math genius. And this change occurred because Matt Damon apparently showed the script to one of his Harvard professors, the Nobel Prize-winning American theoretical physicist Sheldon Glashow. And this guy persuaded Matt to make the change because he thought it would make sense for a lone wolf like Will Hunting to be a math guy. And another physicist, a guy named Brian Greene from Columbia University, later observed, having some deep insight about the universe typically is a group project in the modern era, whereas doing some mathematical theorem is a singular undertaking very often. And Will's whole thing in the movie is that he pushes people away. He's not really a group kind of guy, so this all makes sense. Professor Greene continued in his interview with Business Insider, it does work better in the sense of you got this guy, he sees a problem on the board, and he goes ahead and solves it. It's unlikely that someone could look at data by themselves and could come up with a theory of the origins of the universe on their own. So that's less believable. Yes, it's a much easier plot point as a problem on the board. Take a pencil and you solve it. Interestingly, this professor says that the first math problem that Will solves on the blackboard is, quote, not a particularly difficult problem.
Rude.
I know. That scene is actually where there's the math problem left up on the board is apparently based on a real life incident that happened to Matt Damon's non-math genius brother Kyle. Matt later said that Kyle was visiting a physicist friend that he knew at MIT, and he was walking down what was known as the Infinite Corridor, which is this long corridor that had a bunch of blackboards on the other side. And he says, so my brother, who was an artist, picked up some chalk and wrote an incredibly elaborate, totally fake version of an equation. And it was so cool and completely insane that no one erased it for months. I guess all the math wonks at MIT tried to take a shot at trying to solve it. And there's a great piece in The Ringer called Remembering the Wonderful Little Idiosyncrasies of Good Will Hunting on its 20th anniversary by a writer named Shea Serraro. And it makes fun of the way that Will solves the math problems in this movie. They write, you can always tell how smart someone is by where they write their math equations. If a guy writes a math equation on a mirror or a window or any other place you wouldn't expect to find one, you know he's a genius. Remember when Eduardo wrote the formula on the window in The Social Network? Or when John wrote the formulas on the window in A Beautiful Mind? Or when Christian wrote down the formulas on the windows in The Accountant? Conversely, if a guy writes a math equation on a piece of paper, then that's how you know you're dealing with a math simpleton. And speaking of Will's superhuman intelligence, his rapid reading rate in the movie seems ridiculous until you learn that the guy who holds the world record for speed reading, a man named Howard Berg, can read 80 pages a minute. That's a page in less than a second.
What is the standard for that? What is
being able to recall
comprehension?
Yeah, I guess.
That man is no.
So this makes Will's 2 seconds a page pace seem pathetic by comparison. Yeah, I don't know. It's nuts.
That's a grift. That's a lie. Fake news. I'm sorry. No.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to reiterate that both Matt and Ben come from an incredibly intellectual background. Will Hunting in the movie talks about being a big fan of The People's History of the United States by the legendary historian Howard Zinn, and he even recommends that book to his therapist, Sean, played by Robin Williams. In real life, Howard Zinn was Matt and Ben's family friend and neighbor. So again, these guys come from an incredibly intellectual background. And speaking of family friends, Ben Affleck's godfather was close with the director Terrence Malick, who directed Badlands and Days of Heaven, and a little later after Good Will Hunting came out, The Thin Red Line. And very good at networking at this point, Matt and Ben arranged a meeting with Terrence Malick to see what he thought of their movie script. And they discussed the plot over dinner, and they talked about the ending of the movie, or the original ending, I should say, where Will Hunting drives off with Minnie Driver's character, Skylar. And Matt Damon later recalled, in the middle of the dinner, Terrence Malick said, "I think it would be better if she left and he went after her." And Ben and I looked at each other. It was one of those things where you go, of course that's better. And Terrence Malick started talking about the Italian director Michelangelo Antonioni. He said, in Italian movies, a guy just leaves town at the end, and that's enough. And we said, oh, of course that's enough. Bunch of face palms. That's how they changed their ending. Another interesting element of an early version of Good Will Hunting was that Will was supposed to die.
Hell yeah.
You'll remember that near the start of this film, Will and his crew have a fight with Carmine Scarpaglia. And in this early draft, Carmine and his gang come back at the end of the movie and kill Will with a baseball bat as he's leaving for San Francisco with Skylar. And Matt Damon later explained, Will, deep down, actually wanted to be killed. It was his way of getting out. And thankfully, they jettisoned this Uncut Gems-esque bummer ending. Spoilers. But when Gus Van Sant signed on as director for Good Will Hunting, he initially requested a death of his own. He wanted Ben Affleck's character Chucky to get killed in an accident at the construction site where he works. And that was going to be the climax of the movie's second act. Crushed like a bug, Matt Damon recalled him asking. Matt and Ben very reluctantly went away and wrote it, and then Gus Van Sant read it and said, "This is a terrible idea." And it was removed.
Kudos to Gus.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, idea was bad. Sorry. And there is also a long lost sex scene between Will Hunting and his psychologist, Sean McGuire. I should explain. Matt and Ben were becoming very disillusioned with Castle Rock Entertainment, who were the production company that bought their script. And the production company were requesting endless rewrites, and Matt and Ben were convinced that they weren't actually reading these new drafts because they no longer cared about the script and they were just going to let it die on the vine. So to test the executives, Matt and Ben added a love scene between Matt Damon's character and Robin Williams' character just to see if anyone was paying attention. The example I read was something like, Sean talks to Will and unloads his conscience. Will takes a moment and then gives Sean a soulful look and leans in and starts blowing him. As it turns out, no one at Castle Rock said anything, and this made Matt and Ben even more depressed. Matt later said they weren't reading the script closely anymore. It was literally probably a full paragraph about what these two characters were doing to each other. And Ben picks up the story. We would turn that in, and they wouldn't even mention all those scenes where Sean and Will were jerking each other off. And then later, when they were searching for a new production company to buy the script, they decided to go with Miramax because when they met with Harvey Weinstein, he was like, yeah, my only real note is that on page 60, the two leads, both straight men, have a sex scene. Why is that there? And they were like, it's like sword in the stone. Like, oh, you actually read the thing. All right, you're the guy. You're the one. And that's when they knew they found a new home because he was the first executive to say anything about it.
Boy, the bar in Hollywood, huh?
You read.
Good Lord. But before they had even taken the script to Miramax, there was one major battle that they fought over at Castle Rock, and that was over casting. Matt and Ben wrote Good Will Hunting as a starring vehicle for themselves. The studio was not thrilled about this because they were obviously not big enough stars. It was a cliche, then and now, that every actor has a screenplay that they were just trying to get made to showcase their own talents, and the cliche is they're all terrible. One of the only exceptions to this rule is Sylvester Stallone with Rocky, who turned down that movie getting made with other people for years. And so Matt and Ben were told that Castle Rock wanted Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio in the lead roles instead. Whew. Leo, for context, would have just starred in The Basketball Diaries in 1995, and Brad would have been coming off of Seven in that same year. Can you imagine?
It would have been pretty good, except for the terrible accents.
Who's who?
Oh, Leo's got Leo's hair in Titanic is Matt Damon's hair in Good Will Hunting.
That's true. That's true.
The same.
Yeah.
And then Brad Pitt's a little older, I think. So yeah.
Has Brad Pitt ever done a Boston accent?
Oh God, I hope not. Nah, not that I can think of.
Matt and Ben were extremely unhappy about this, in addition to the other creative disagreements they had with Castle Rock, which also included who was going to direct the movie. They had also wanted to do it themselves, which was also never going to happen. The studio thought it was risky enough buying a script that had been written by actors to get them auditions. Affleck later said, when the question came up, we would say, we'll direct it, and there would be silence in the room. It was a polite silence, like, are you high? But it was the beginning of my own directorial ambition. And Affleck would later, notch some directing successes. Gone Baby Gone, The Town, probably the most successful one is Argo. Do people like Gone Baby Gone in The Town?
Yeah, it has its fans. I mean, Argo won Best Picture.
Yeah, I was going to say,
that'll do it.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, Castle Rock got tired of it before they did and issued them an ultimatum. You have 30 days to find someone else to buy your script and give us our money back, or else you guys are out and we're moving ahead without your involvement.
We're just sick of dealing with them. Like, all right, you guys are a pain in the ass.
According to Affleck, they said that someone else would direct it, rewrite it, act in it, and that we'd be lucky to get invited to a premiere. But instead of scaring us, it kind of emboldened us, because then we really thought, this, we're going to go out there and do it. Even so, this obviously had them freaked out because they saw their big break slowly circling the drain. And according to Damon, over the following weeks, we went back to meet with all of the studios who had bid on the script, who we hadn't gone with, and basically everybody took the meeting just to tell us to go f*** ourselves.
Hollywood.
Affleck tells the story of them going back to Interscope, who had initially offered them $1 million, more than Castle Rock, and the head of the company said, I'll tell you why I took this meeting. Because I'm going to tell you I'm going to pass. And Affleck would later use that scene as an inspiration for a scene in Argo. So, desperate to find a buyer and with time running out, they took the script to their friend, Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith had broken through with his debut film in Clerks in 1994, which is like along with Pulp Fiction and probably Slackers too, as like the sort of the trifecta of indie movies in the early 90s, right?
Would you consider Reality Bites?
Yes, maybe. Was that an indie or just like an indie aesthetic?
Yeah, you're right. Maybe it was the indie aesthetic.
Anyway, Smith, after making Clerks in 1994, had gotten close with Ben Affleck and cast him in Mallrats and Chasing Amy, as we mentioned earlier. Those movies had been distributed by Harvey Weinstein's company Miramax, and so Smith read the Good Will Hunting script with the intention of bringing it to the Weinsteins. He apparently really liked the script. He later told Entertainment Weekly, I started it on the shitter, and I stayed on the whole time, with characteristic Kevin Smith charm. Sure enough, he took the script to the Weinsteins and said, drop everything you're doing right now and read this. They did just that and shelled out $1 million to buy the script from Castle Rock. Miramax allowed Matt and Ben to star in the movie, but they still insisted on getting someone else to direct. And the two of them approached Kevin Smith to do it, and he promptly responded by telling them, "No, you need someone good." Yeah, fair. He elaborated later, saying, "I did not have enough talent to pull it off then. Even now, I don't think I do." Fair. Despite this, both Ben and Matt are in agreement that without Kevin Smith, the movie would never have happened. Kevin saved Good Will Hunting, Matt Damon later said. "This is not a small side note. He is the reason Good Will Hunting got made. We were dead in the water. All the offers had evaporated." Ben Affleck's take on this is steeped in a little bit of shame because he said, "I promised Kevin I would thank him if we ever got an Oscar and promptly forgot. And then I told him, if I ever win again, I swear to God I'm going to thank you. And then when Argo won for Best Picture, he forgot again." But obviously there were no hard feelings. Matt and Ben went on to appear in Dogma and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which features a memorable scene where they are shooting Good Will Hunting 2 hunting season, which is a great joke. And so, in a sense, Kevin Smith got to direct a Good Will Hunting after all. And that film also features Gus Van Sant as himself.
Yeah, I think it was himself.
Yeah.
Yes, Gus Van Sant was ultimately the guy who got the director's chair, but there were a few other big names up for the job before he got the gig. Contender number one was Mel Gibson. Can you imagine Mel Gibson, fresh off of Braveheart, directing Good Will Hunting?
Tell you one thing, we've had a lot of nice things to say about Boston, but you put Mel Gibson in Boston, I'm surprised that the air didn't curdle in Cambridge. Good Lord.
Yeah, I know. After Miramax bought the script from Castle Rock, they set up meetings with a number of potential directors, including Mel Gibson, who had a lot of heat, admittedly, coming off of Braveheart. And I guess when they met with Mel, Harvey Weinstein wanted Matt and Ben to butter him up. So he was like, tell him how much you liked Braveheart. The problem was neither of them had seen Braveheart yet, and Harvey hit the roof. He's like, well, just lie. So sure enough, the first words out of their mouth to Mel were, we just want to tell you how much we loved Braveheart.
And we also hate black people.
Hollywood. Mel took the project on and actually spent a few months developing it, but he was going really slowly, which led Matt and Ben to get the impression that he wasn't really all that interested. And they were also worried about aging out of the roles due to the lengthy pre-production that they'd already have. I mean, Will's supposed to be 20 in the movie. I think he turns 21 during it, and Matt was already 25, 26. So they were starting to get a little antsy. So they ultimately asked Mel Gibson if he'd step down from the director role in favor of someone who actually seemed to give a damn. And shockingly, considering his clout at the time, he did. The chutzpah these guys have. Telling Mel Gibson, didn't Braveheart just win the Oscar like the year before? Good Lord.
It's really, it's verges on hubris. It's really, it's really impressive.
Yeah. Miramax also briefly considered Steven Soderbergh as a director before they approached Michael Mann. And Michael Mann wanted to make a couple really drastic changes. He wanted Will and his friends to be car thieves. And he didn't want Matt Damon in there at all.
The most Michael Mann note of all time. Yeah, they gotta be car thieves.
Yeah. And he didn't like Matt Damon at all. And the producers were like, it's kind of a package deal. Can you at least screen test him? And he did. And he still hated Matt Damon. Producers ultimately sided with Matt, which is pretty cool. So they told Michael Mann to take a hike. And this is really bizarre. It came out last year that Ben Stiller was also considered to direct Good Will Hunting. And he made his directorial debut with Reality Bites in 1994, and he was looking for something to follow it up. And that's when the script for Good Will Hunting landed on his desk. And he said, I got sent it by my agent at the time. He's talking to Howard Stern. The first turnoff was that these two guys who wrote it were attached to act in it. I was like, what? Come on, I cast my own projects. Who are these guys? And Howard Stern countered by saying, but it was Good Will Hunting. It's one of the greatest movies ever made, right? And Ben Stiller deadpans, well, I haven't seen it in a while.
And then he made The Cable Guy.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he directed that. Yeah. I didn't realize that. I mean, I knew that Ben Stiller was a director, but I didn't realize that he directed Zoolander and I guess I knew he did Tropic Thunder, but he did a lot of directorial stuff that I totally forgot about. What else did he do? Well, I guess those were the only two good. Tropic Thunder, Zoolander, and Reality Bites were, I guess, the only 3 good ones. So that's interesting. But the job ultimately went to Gus Van Sant. Matt and Ben were big fans of his movie Drugstore Cowboy with Matt Dillon and Kelly Lynch. And Matt Damon had actually auditioned for his movie To Die For, ultimately losing out to Joaquin Phoenix. But Casey Affleck, Ben's brother, had been cast in that movie, which is kind of what gave them an in with Gus. And it was actually during the production of To Die For that Gus Van Sant first discovered the music of Elliott Smith. Well, he later said he didn't use it because, quote, I was looking for something that was really raw, but we were thinking more in terms of heavy metal. So that's why we didn't use Elliott in that movie. Yeah, it's kind of the anti-metal, Elliott Smith. Van Sant was more used to making art house movies, and Good Will Hunting is, I think to this day, by far his most commercially successful film ever. In fact, it made just $9 million less than all 16 of his other films combined. So yeah. I think his passion project after this was the shot-for-shot remake of Psycho.
Remake of Psycho starring Vince Vaughn, yes. And Anne Heche.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a bizarre
that was super bizarre. That was in the era when I was going out to Los Angeles a lot and would go around the Universal backlot, and the Bates Motel and the Psycho House are still kept there. And so I remember walking around these. They weren't even facades. The Bates Motel actually had rooms you could go into, and going in there, and one of them had a shower in it with fake blood splattered around it. At least I hope it was fake. I don't know how much of that was just for tourists and stuff. You weren't really supposed to be walking around back there unless you were authorized. So I don't know who that would have been for, but yeah, no, it was really weird. I remember being around there right around the time when Gus Van Sant and Vince Vaughn and Anne Heche were making that.
Yeah, it's his arc is hilarious. He did Good Will Hunting, Psycho, Finding Forrester, something called Jerry, written by Damon and Casey Affleck. I have no memory of this movie. And then he did that school shooter movie Elephant, and then he did the weird Kurt Cobain thing.
What's the weird Kurt Cobain thing?
Last Days?
I have no idea what that is.
Oh, really? That's funny. That's the movie where Michael Pitt basically just plays thinly veiled Kurt Cobain and just wanders around his house.
That's really weird. Where the hell are we? Matt and Ben, so cute. They were so green that when they took Gus Van Sant out for early preliminary meetings to try to get him on board, they took him to Denny's. Ben Affleck said, Denny's was sort of normal for us. Where else would we go? We didn't even have any frame of reference of what famous people were supposed to do. Aww. But what really kicked the production into high gear was when Matt Damon got cast in the film adaptation of John Grisham's bestseller, The Rainmaker. And at that time, adaptations of John Grisham's legal thrillers were huge. You had The Firm, The Pelican Brief, The Client, The Chamber, and bucking the trend, A Time to Kill. So getting a role in The Rainmaker was big news for Matt, and he excitedly faxed the message to Harvey Weinstein, I am the Rainmaker. No further explanation. And according to the story, Harvey had no idea what this meant and thought this was Matt Damon's way of threatening him with legal action.
He's like, are you into water sports too?
Wait, this is probably the best segue I could possibly ever have. Did I tell you this? I think I texted you the Harvey Weinstein story over the weekend. Did I text you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. A friend of a friend I just learned worked at the Weinstein's company. And I guess it was a thing around the office. I'm sure there were many things around the office, but one of them was don't have bowls of candy on your desk because when Harvey comes by, he has no self-control and he will drain them. He will eat them all. And it became a not infrequent occurrence that Harvey would just eat an entire bowl of candy on someone's desk at once and then go back into his office and vomit. And it was somebody's assigned job in the office to clean up Harvey Weinstein's vomit when he ate too much candy off of somebody else's desk. So, yeah. Anyway, that was my. Yeah, we're kind of soft on Harvey in this episode, so I'm glad I got that in there. But anyway, what Matt was trying to say was that he knew he was about to have some heat on him and wanted to fast track Good Will Hunting. And The Rainmaker was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, who had just worked on the notorious box office bomb Jack with Robin Williams, which is how Robin got a hold of the script and signed on to the production, which we'll talk more about in a bit. Shooting for Good Will Hunting started on April 14th, 1997. It was completed in just 9 weeks. Because remember, this was a $10 million movie. It was very cheap. And supposedly the first thing that they shot was the bar scene with Robin Williams and Stellan Skarsgård, who plays the arrogant professor. And Matt later talked about how powerful it was to watch their words come to life. He said, quote, "When Gus called action and we watched these guys do our scene verbatim, we'd waited so long for this to happen. I remember just sitting next to Ben and I had tears rolling down my cheeks because I was just so happy that it was really happening. It was a mixture of joy and disbelief and relief and gratitude. That was a really nice moment. I'm not ashamed to say it." And Ben Affleck added, "It was all we thought about this movie. It was all we focused on. And we never really believed it would happen. And it sort of represented the sum total of what we tried to do. You know, we might have cried for other reasons had we been able to see the whole future and understand the complexity of what we'd gotten ourselves into. But at the time, we had the sort of surety and naivete of being just guys in our mid-20s who weren't thinking about anything except what was happening just right there in the moment and feeling a tremendous amount of belief and satisfaction that it actually happened, that we'd actually accomplished something. We just felt relieved that we hadn't totally failed." Ben Affleck with this trademark downerism. One thing Matt Damon was not especially grateful for was his hair in this movie. He told an interviewer in 2012 that the shaggy mushroom cut deal was, quote, "so my fault. For whatever reason, at that age, I loved that haircut." And Gus Van Sant was like, "Really?" And Ben was like, "Really?" If you look at Ben's hair in that movie, it's totally acceptable by today's standards. But no, I wanted the frosted hair. I don't know what my problem was. I look like I should be singing backup for Color Me Bad.
Yikes. Accurate.
Yeah, it's not good. I mean, it's no worse than Leonardo DiCaprio's hair in Titanic, though.
Yeah, it's true.
See that tweet that was going around? It's like, yeah, wow, like James Cameron got the original carpet makers to replicate the carpet from the Titanic, and no expense was spared on getting all the details exact, having the correct insignia stamped on the cutlery, and I mean, he rebuilt the Titanic, and yet they left Leonardo DiCaprio's hair.
It's probably in his contract.
Yeah, you don't touch the hair. Much more stylish in Good Will Hunting is the character of Skylar. Is Skylar like the official Gen X dream girl name? I feel like that's just like the most... Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. She's played, of course, by Minnie Driver. And in our prerequisite Harvey Weinstein is a scumbag anecdote for this episode, he initially didn't want her in the movie because he thought she wasn't attractive enough. But he eventually backed down after being persuaded by Matt and Ben and Gus Van Sant. The character of Skylar was based on Matt's girlfriend, who was also named Skylar, a woman named Skylar Satinstein, who was a medical student at Harvard when Matt was enrolled there. And just before filming started on Good Will Hunting, she left him for Metallica drummer Lars Ulrich, whom she later married the year Good Will Hunting was released. So... the universe was kept in check for Matt Damon there. He later said that he lost the love of his life to, quote, "a fucking rock star who's got $80 million in his own jet, and he's a bad rock star too." I mean, Lars is high on the list of the most hated rock stars, I'd say, in the world, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very high on that list. The real-life Skylar and Lars later divorced in 2004, but there are a lot of little personal moments in the movie. The character of Skylar talks about her dad dying years earlier, and the real-life Skylar coped with the loss of her dad years before she and Matt met at Harvard. Her father was a TV director, Frank Satinstein, who directed episodes of the Jackie Gleason show The Honeymooners and What's My Line, the pioneering early game show. So that's weird. But yeah, I love all these little touches of real life that Matt and Ben put into this movie. The number of the construction company where Will and Chucky work, that phone number was the actual number for the Massachusetts construction company that Matt Damon worked for in high school. I love that, these little moments. Matt Damon and Minnie Driver actually dated for a time when this movie was being filmed before breaking up just after it was released. And I guess Matt went on the Oprah Winfrey show and announced that he was single, and that was how Minnie found out that they were done. Which is, I know, he seems like such a nice guy. It's a very like scumbaggy thing to do.
Yeah.
She later told the Telegraph, "We split up very publicly that April in 1998, which was grim, and it turned from this beautiful thing into something so dark. I always was really sad that we didn't stay friends because it was absolutely incandescent making that film." So that's not cute, but we do in fact have a cute anecdote that occurred between Minnie and Matt during the filming of Good Will Hunting. In the scene where they're in bed together and Will's just sort of mumbling half asleep, that is real. Matt Damon had fallen asleep, presumably because he was exhausted from writing and starring in this thing, so he just crawled into the bed on set during a lunch break and passed out. And Minnie later recalled, "We had this scene after lunch that took place in the bed, so I think he thought he was just going to get a head start on the whole thing." I remember the cinematographer saying, "Let him sleep. We'll just shoot it from above." And they built the structure so you're above the bed. And Gus was like, "Well, just go and get in the bed with him." And I got in the bed and was like, "Babe, we gotta do this thing." And he just kind of mumbles. And it was so quiet and he was so sleepy. And we did the scene based around him, like really being asleep. And I love that everything worked around that. It's such a beautiful scene. One of my very favorites.
Sleepy boy.
Yeah. Weird aside that I assume is not a coincidence. Skylar's room number is 206, and that is, I believe, the number of bones in the human body, which is cute because she's supposed to be majoring in pre-med.
I know that from Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Linda Hamilton breaks the guy's hand with a nightstick, and he's like, "You broke my hand." She's like, "There are 206 bones in the human body. That's one." It's great. Love Linda Hamilton.
You know who wrote that line?
William Goldman.
James Cameron.
Oh. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
Now we have arrived at the part of the show where we talk about Ben Affleck as Chucky. Some of his best, but yeah, it's kind of sad he peaked.
Argo.
I don't think he's good in Argo.
Dogma.
I don't think he's good in Dogma either.
Armageddon.
Keep going. What else you got?
Gone Girl.
Oh, he's good in Gone
Yeah,
Girl, yeah,
yeah.
because it weaponizes his
Crippling
whole
unlikability.
thing. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, probably the best acting of his career is in the scene where he tells Will he's got to stop being afraid of success and leave town. If not for him, then for all of his friends who don't have what he had, his brain, and they believe in him and they want the best for him. And that was a speech that Affleck and Damon had drafted over and over and over again, and they spent months in working on it. And Gus Van Sant said that he knew that Ben nailed it in the first take, but after having written it for so long, Ben had a hard time believing that it was just over in 5 minutes. He told Boston Magazine, "I had been thinking about the scene and how it was going to play out, then reading it out loud and writing it and rewriting it and rehearsing it in my mind over years and years. It was just kind of like, is it over? It's just hard to almost internalize the fact that, okay, we're going to wait 4 years and it's going to be over in 5 seconds. Kind of like losing my virginity." He does have a way with words. They ultimately did 2 more takes, but they used the first one, and it remains one of the best moments in a career with
Not that many of them.
surely others.
Oh, I like that. This brings us to a segment of the show that we like to call The Unbearable Sadness of Ben Affleck.
Oh, I like him in Chasing Amy, actually.
Once again, like Gone Girl, he's
a befuddled idiot.
But again, that's his reputation. And as we'll get to now, he actually is so much more than that. And the fact that he only succeeds at being this befuddled idiot is very depressing to him.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I love about Ben Affleck is his apparently unbreakable core of sadness. Have you seen that? We've all seen this thing of him standing on the beach, but have you seen the red carpet thing when he's with
When
J-Lo.
his face just falls.
Just deflates, and it's just
Somebody comes up and is talking to him, and he's like, chipper.
Yeah, he
Hollywood
turns
red
it
carpet
on.
guy. Yeah,
He turns it on. He grins. He's like, "Hey," you can see him doing the thing, and then just in a second, it falls away, and it's just the look of a man haunted by years.
I'm so fascinated by him.
So
Fascinated
it's
by him.
It's just, it's kind of like
It's like Billy Joel.
we're talking about. Yes, exactly. It's like we're just talking about Billy Joel. It's just like someone who succeeded at their chosen medium, and by every other conceivable possible measure of human success, spiritual, creative, financial, and is still just like, nope.
Well, you know what it is? I think he's successful, but he doesn't have the validation from, I think, what he would deem the intellectual elite. Like Billy Joel never was a critical favorite ever.
Sure.
And I think that Ben Affleck feels that he's Matt Damon's dumb friend in the public perception. I think that this movie was simultaneously the best and worst thing that ever happened to Ben Affleck, Good Will Hunting, because I think the public viewed him as his character in that movie. I mean, Matt's older. He's the one who went to Harvard. He's the one who started writing the script to begin with. He was the one who played the lead role. He was the one who dated the lead actress. And Ben had a PlayStation or something,
Yeah, there's that Family Guy joke about it's like a cutaway joke where it's like them writing the script to Good Will Hunting, and he's like, I can't believe we wrote with it's the Affleck is the Avatar is like, I can't believe we finished the script. And he's like, I've been writing this for the past 10 years, and all you've done is sit on the couch and smoke pot and eat briars. And there's like a beat, and the Affleck guy goes, "Is there any more pot?" So yes, that's that joke, and that was in Family Guy in like 2002 or 3. So that reputation persisted. Affleck would later say, I've had people say, "Wow, you're pretty smart," as if they expected this real sort of dummy, a guy who is even less intelligent than Chucky. I always forget too that he's bilingual.
What?
Yeah, when he's fluent in Spanish. When he was dating Ana de Armas, they would speak in Spanish back and forth to each other.
How? Just
Affleck?
good at language, or
he learned with his mom traveling around Mexico apparently for like an extended amount of time,
cool,
like a year or something. He was like,
he's a smart dude.
Yeah, we and I mean, yeah, it's just to me, it's the sadness more than the dumbness. Like, I mean, there's that image of him just disassociating in the middle of a junket next to is it he's doing it next to Superman, Henry Cavill for Batman v Superman, the Sound of Sadness one, where he just clearly goes away and just stares off into nothingness. There's the one of him smoking a cigarette, like up against the wall, just like staring into nothing, like just eyes closed. Yeah, I
had a friend who got that put. Actually, I think it's my girlfriend's sister, painted onto a canvas and is framed. She's from Boston, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. That and the Duncan thing, man. Just like the, dropping the handful of Duncan in his doorway. It's just, it's so great. I mean, he is such a, it's sad because it is such a, it's the striver. He just wants to be so much more than the guy with the chiseled jaw and the little baby teeth that Michael Bay made get fixed. We have the aforementioned as arrows in this quiver. We have the aforementioned BuzzFeed article, the famous New Yorker piece called "The Great Sadness of Ben Affleck." That is basically kind of mean to him. Isn't that the one where he tweeted about it?
I don't remember that.
He said something about how, because they commented on his Phoenix tattoo, his back tattoo.
Oh, yeah, that he claimed
which
was
is the
fake.
most Boston thing ever.
Yeah, would you like to describe his
full
Phoenix?
Back Phoenix tattoo? Yeah, the picture, if I'm remembering correctly, that the New Yorker article uses is him standing on the beach, in a towel, and he's not in fighting shape. Let's say, and he has a towel sort of up around his midriff, and I'm not a tattoo artist.
But your wife is.
My wife is, and I don't know. There's like an omerta about like on tattoo artists in public, but so I don't actually know who did that. But man, I'm sure it's technically good, but it is just this. It's every color of the rainbow.
Yeah.
It has what are clearly peacock tails.
Has there been a
and-
clear image of it ever?
Yeah, I'm looking at it, buddy. I'm looking at it right now.
A very clear image?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because the fire seems to terminate on his butt, his left butt cheek. So it may actually go down further than his back. There's a tiny moon up in the upper right corner.
Yeah.
And like, dude, I
Looks
had
like
my
he's
back.
screaming into a towel as in the picture that I'm seeing.
I had my back done. And it's like, that was like seven sessions. And they're discrete pieces that are all kind of all over. But you do this in several sessions. So he committed to this. I mean, you do outline, then you do fill, and then you do color, and then you come back for a touch up. We're talking like several 4 to 6 hour sessions. Anyway, the writer in the New Yorker made reference. Naomi Fry was the writer, and she made reference to his tattoo. I believe she used the phrase or word garish to describe it. He tweeted in response to it. He said, "I have thick skin bolstered by garish tattoos." He's aware of it. I mean, you know, he saw the Henry Cavill thing. He says when he was asked by the BBC, nonetheless, asked him what he learned from doing Batman and v Superman. He said, "It taught me not to do interviews with Henry Cavill where I don't say anything and they can lay Simon and Garfunkel tracks over it." So, anyway, all of this is to say that, you know, his head hangs heavy. Anyway, Ben Affleck talked about the public misconception of his role in Good Will Hunting in a 2000 interview with Talk magazine. "I took the whole writer thing very seriously. In retrospect, if I'd known then what I know now, I would have expanded the part that I played. Matt had a bigger part in School Ties, and he had been a lead in Geronimo. Both movies totally bombed, and no one was offering him any parts, but you could make the case that he was the actor. I'd only had supporting roles, and there wasn't a lot of room in the script for us both to star, especially because we needed to have a big name, like Robin Williams, in order to get it made. So I felt like, well, okay, we'll cut my scenes out." And this put them on the differing roads that they made. You know, Damon got the sort of tag as the serious dramatic actor with talented Mr. Ripley and, you know, his role in Ocean's 11. And then Affleck's career had stuff like Pearl Harbor and Bounce, which is a pretty massive flop. Even Damon's action movies are largely better than Affleck's, which is sad. He couldn't even let him have the meathead action stuff.
Nope.
He was like, "I'm going to do this thing called Burn Identity where I kick a lot of ass." You can do Daredevil. In the BuzzFeed piece, Anne Helen Peterson makes the memorable comparison. "If Damon's career choices were Whole Foods, Affleck's were increasingly Costco. He was making a lot of money, but had no critical cachet or success, which we have already compared to Billy Joel. And in Ben's case, he's found himself trapped in action star land. And yeah, you know, he's really an son of Bay Area intellectuals and drama kid at heart." There's a story from pre-production phase of Armageddon where Ben left the first meeting with director Michael Bay and producer Jerry Bruckheimer, and Michael Bay turns to Bruckheimer and says, "Jerry, he's a geek." And Bay remembers thinking, okay, so he's this kind of pale Boston guy. We can work him out, give him a tan, do everything to make him a star. But Liv Tyler, his co-star in that movie, saw through it. She told People magazine, "Ben has this nerdy smart guy side to him. He's obsessed with the New York Times crossword puzzle. He reads a lot. He's really interested in knowing more about the world." And yet another friend of his described Ben's idea of the good life as eating at Subway and playing video games. He has vintage Ms. Pac-Man and Millipede arcade cabinets in his Manhattan loft, which is an adorable detail. And while Matt Damon was pulling off the big con as the pickpocket Linus in Ocean's 11, Ben Affleck is getting banned from couch carting at blackjack in the Hard Rock Las Vegas.
That that just sums up like the can't catch a breakness of being Ben Affleck. It's like Matt Damon is pulling off the big con in Vegas in this great movie franchise. Ben Affleck is getting legitimately good at this game. And he's getting so good that he's getting tossed out of the casino.
He commented on all this in October of 2014 to Details magazine. Said, I took some time to learn the game and became a decent blackjack player. Once I became decent, the casinos asked me not to play blackjack. I mean, the fact that being good at a game is against the rules at a casino should tell you something about a casino.
It's not illegal. It's just frowned upon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if Argo filled that hole for him. I think I know that the Tender Bar, that new movie, one of his most recent ones was, I think, a lot of his reckoning with his own personal demons with alcoholism and his sort of the specter of his father. But I don't know. He's in. I think the last thing he's been in the news for recently is just getting back with Jennifer Lopez.
Decent thing to get back in the news for, if we're honest with ourselves.
He was in Clerks 3. Oh, he was in that bar. I mean, he was in the Last Duel, which a lot of people said really good things about.
Which is the first time that he and Matt Damon collaborated on a screenplay since Good Will Hunting.
And but then he was in Deep Water with Ana de Armas, and that was pretty well ripped apart. Anyway, back to Good Will Hunting. Another star of this film is the word Miramax toyed with the idea of making the movie PG-13, which meant that it could contain no more than 3 f***s. I've always heard that was 1.
I was going to say 3, maybe in 1997, the 3 sounds high.
Matt said, okay, so how many are we over? And the Miramax executive checked his notes and responded, 145. The movie is rated R, for those of you keeping track at home. And of course, dozens of quotables, like, aside from "It's not your fault," because f*** him, that's why.
Yeah, I say that a lot.
How you like them apples? Which is, I guess, also in Chinatown.
Yeah, I had never heard that phrase until this movie, but I guess it was just a phrase that Matt and Ben heard around Boston growing up. It's like an old-timey...
I will end you. Is that the first place that I heard that from?
I think Robin Williams said that he heard that at a bar when some big guy was picking on a little guy, and the little guy all of a sudden just summoned, stood at his full height of like 5'3" or whatever, and just growled back, "I will end you." And it just stuck in Robin's mind because he just thought it was just, the whole scene was so vivid to him, but he just thought it was such a great line. I believe that was a Robin Williams improv in this movie.
Yeah, my boy's wicked smart. Well, all right.
Oh yeah, my boy's wicked
snacks.
Smart. That is
but we got snacks.
Yeah, we gotta talk about Casey Affleck's character, Morgan. He apparently wasn't supposed to be in this movie at all. Casey Affleck was just hanging around the set in order to make a behind-the-scenes documentary of the filming of Good Will Hunting for his older brother, Ben, very proud younger brother. And for whatever reason, Gus Van Sant just loved him and kept pestering him to be in the movie, despite the fact that he didn't have a manager or even an agent. And eventually Casey Affleck said yes, and eventually made his character up basically on the spot, improvising most of his dialogue. And he most memorably made up the line, "I swallowed a bug," which is his exit line when Skylar comes over to talk to Will at the bar. And it just seems like a random throwaway joke, just something goofy that this goofy guy says. But it's actually a reference, a really obscure cinematic reference to a behind-the-scenes documentary called Heart of Darkness, which is about the chaotic production of Apocalypse Now, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, who's in the mix of all this Good Will Hunting stuff. In this documentary, there's a moment when Marlon Brando stops mid-take when he's in the middle of one of the Colonel Kurtz monologues and says, swallowed a bug. And I'm guessing Casey Affleck watched this making of documentary as inspiration when he was gearing up to film the Good Will Hunting shoot, and then that line popped into his head on the set. But there was a lot of improv in this movie, so much so that Matt and Ben did what I think is kind of a cool thing when it came time for Oscar campaigning. They sent copies of the script along with a print of the movie to all the members of the Academy who were voting, so that anyone watching could follow along the script and see where it deviated from, what was on the screen. And that was a cool way to both give credit to the actors who'd ad-libbed their lines, which, Robin Williams was a huge factor in that. And also it showed showed that there were a lot of scenes that were done completely as written, and proving that Matt and Ben were very good at their job as screenwriters. We'll get into this more at the end of the episode, but the only 3 people that had ever been nominated for writing and acting in the same year up to this point was Charlie Chaplin for The Great Dictator, Orson Welles for Citizen Kane, and Sylvester Stallone for Rocky. And then Matt Damon became the 4th for Good Will Hunting. Impressive company.
Good for him. Well, we can't get into ad-libbing without talking about the American treasure that is Robin Williams. You recall from earlier in this episode, once it gets edited into coherence, that Matt Damon was in The Rainmaker, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, who had just made the movie Jack with Robin Williams. You want to talk about Jack, Jordan?
Yeah, does anyone remember that? Like, it's almost one of those movies that I feel like I just made up in a fever dream. Robin Williams plays a kid who ages at like 5 or 10 times the rate that normal kids do. So it's basically like Big, really, if you think about it. It's like Big. Yeah. It's like Big but sad, because then he obviously will die a lot sooner. And like the end of the movie, he's like graduating high school or middle school or something, and he like looks like an old man, and all of his friends look exactly the same, and they're kids, and it's a real bummer. Yeah,
weird film. Anyway, presumably at this point, Matt Damon asked Francis to pass the script to Good Will Hunting along to Robin, who was very impressed. First thing he said after reading it reportedly was, "Who are these guys?" He described the film as extraordinary and was shocked to discover that the screenwriters were 2 guys in their early 20s. He agreed to take on the role of a therapist, Sean Maguire, which gave the movie its needed dose of star power and ensure that the film would basically get made. Robin told Boston Magazine in 2013, "What drew me to the role was the idea of a guy trying to give back who hasn't been practicing in a while. Here he is, a vet with a history, with a life, an intelligent guy who admits he's not as brilliant as the kid, but who is saying, 'You're brilliant, but you don't know shit about certain things.' That appealed to me deeply." The character of Sean was basically a fusion of Ben Affleck's father and Matt Damon's mother, who is an early childhood education professor at Lesley University. There's a lot to unpack there. The painting of the boat that Will mocks in Sean's office was actually painted by Gus Van Sant, and bears a suspicious similarity to the opening scene of 1980's Popeye, Robin Williams' film debut. And in the scene where we meet Sean first in the lecture hall, the words "Susser 1969" are written on the backboard behind him. In 1969, Robin Williams performed in a production of The Taming of the Shrew at Marin College, directed by one Harvey Susser, his first stage director. So this is thought to be a nod to him. Sean becomes kind of a surrogate father. He understands Will because they both went through similar things, parental abuse at a young age and a tragic loss later in life. And Sean was a crucial character in the first versions of the script. The only scene from the first draft of the film that made it into the movie verbatim is the scene where Will and Sean meet for the first time.
And that's where the "I will end you" line comes in, I think, right?
Yeah, if you disrespect my wife again. As you might expect, Robin joked around with pretty much everyone on the set in between takes, doing his litany of impressions, including Janet Reno and Frankenstein. And then Matt Damon would see these and raise him Richard Nixon and Daffy Duck. In the scene where he has this big fight with Stellan Skarsgård, calls him a prick. When they were doing close up with Stellan, Robin would do his lines as various characters. Stellan said later, "I came in and it wasn't Robin. It was Jack Nicholson there. And he talked like Jack Nicholson. He behaved like Jack Nicholson. I tried to play the scene with him because I'm really bad at improvising, so it became very strange, and then everybody laughed. We had to do it again, and I came in, and it was James Cagney. I think it was 5 or 6 takes with a different person I met in that part every time. And then gradually he'd do something more and more like the character in the film." Skarsgård was not alone in finding it difficult to match Robin's energy. Gus Van Sant remembered, "It was really entertaining, and a day after that I was like, isn't that great? Isn't that fun that you guys are improving that?" And Matt said, "No, it's exhausting." He couldn't keep up with Robin. The farting wife scene in the line in therapy was unscripted, and you can see Robin and Matt both cracking up with real laughter. And one of the other tells that it's unscripted is because Matt leans forward to laugh and he goes out of focus in the frame. And then the camera starts to shake up and down because the camera guy couldn't stop from laughing either.
It's a great scene. Yeah, Robin still, after going off on this crazy tangent about his wife, takes it back to the script, talking about the little idiosyncrasies that only I knew about. That's what made her my wife, which I always thought was a beautiful line.
Yeah, but the crowning achievement of his ad-libbing on the film was probably his final line, the final line of the film, when Sean reads the letter that Will left him, which says that he has to leave town because he has to go and see about a girl. And Robin would ad-lib a different reaction line every time. And when he dropped "son of a bitch," stole my line, it was obvious to all that they had a keeper. Matt Damon later called it Robin's best addition to the film. He said there was nothing scripted there. He opens the mailbox and reads the note that I'd written him. Gus and I were right next to the camera because every time he came out for a new take, I would read the letter to him because it's a voiceover. He came out saying different lines every single time. When he said, "son of a bitch stole my line," I grabbed Gus. It was like a bolt. It was just one of those holy shit moments where, like, that's it.
Robin also took a very active role in location scouting for the movie. After signing on, he was very excited to get a taste of South Boston, which for anyone who didn't grow up near Boston in the 90s was a very risky proposition. Matt and Ben took Robin around and I guess ended up at a dive bar called the L Street Tavern. And Ben would later refer to this as a mistake. You would think that Robin Williams would make friends wherever he went, but not in South Boston. The whole crew were mobbed by rowdy locals who apparently resented the fact that there were stars in their midst. One drunk guy asked Robin Williams where he parked his private jet or yacht, accounts vary, and another guy tried to fight Ben Affleck for wearing his hat backwards. I guess apparently the bar had been purchased a few weeks earlier before shooting, and the new owners had plans to renovate it to keep up with the rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. So it's maybe understandable that the sight of actual superstar millionaires in their midst, in their, endangered dive bar, would piss off the locals. So I get it. But despite this tricky encounter, Robin loved the place and told Harvey Weinstein that they had to shoot at the L Street Tavern. Harvey agreed, but then sent a frantic all-caps fax message to Matt and Ben, "Do not take Robin to any more locations," because he feared for his safety. And this L Street Tavern, it's still there. It's just north of L Street Beach, and it attracts fans of the movie and also fans of cheap booze. They had a black tie Oscar party at this dive bar on the night of the Oscars in 1998, which is cute. Although it did get a semi-upscale renovation in the early 2000s, so it's not quite as divey as one might like. There's a sign out front of the L Street Tavern proclaiming the home of Good Will Hunting, which is cute but not strictly true. Will's home was actually, exterior shots of it at least, the triple-decker where he lived is on West 6th Street in South Boston. And the guy who lived in that place at the time the movie was filmed very proudly self-identified for years as, quote, the only guy in Southie who'd never seen Good Will Hunting. He told the Boston Globe, "I got 2 new windows out of the deal, and I met Matt Damon. He said, 'Do you know me?' And I said, 'No, he was just some blonde boy.'" But the neighborhood has certainly changed in the 25 years since Good Will Hunting was filmed. After a renovation, the ground floor apartment where Will supposedly lived sold in 2017 for $729,000. So it's probably worth over $1 million now. And the 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit upstairs from Will in that same building is on the market now, available to rent for $4,500 a month. I think they have washer and dryer, though. Much of this movie was shot around Harvard Square in Cambridge, not far from where Matt and Ben grew up. And they would later say their school was a quarter mile down the road. So this was just super cool for them to bring the whole movie circus to their own doorstep. And the bar where Will meets Skylar and the Baskin and Robbins Dunkin' Donuts combo next door, where he does the whole "I got her number" bit, both closed soon after the movie was shot. I think they actually even renovated the facade of the building so that you can. What I'm saying now is, you can't replicate that scene on the original window where Matt Damon does that, which...
No!
I know, yeah, I know. It belongs in a museum. Now, loyal TMI listeners will know that shooting on the Harvard campus is a difficult thing to pull off because Harvard is famously very reluctant to allow film crews into their hallowed halls of learning. We talked about this in the Legally Blonde episode. Even The Social Network, directed by David Fincher, was denied shooting privileges at Harvard. But the Good Will Hunting production got a helping hand from John Lithgow, who's a Harvard grad and presumably held some sway in the alumni department because he's a big actor. He put in a call, and before long, the production team for Good Will Hunting had access. But the lecture hall in the movie is actually a lecture hall in McLennan Physical Laboratories, which is a building at the University of Toronto, where a lot of the interior shots were filmed on a soundstage there. But no spot in Boston is more synonymous with Good Will Hunting than the bench in the Boston Public Gardens. And Robin Williams' character clues Will into the difference that is a big difference between book knowledge and life experience. And despite the really intimate nature of that scene, there was apparently a crowd of an estimated 3,000 people watching as it was shot. Apparently word got out about the location. And Gus Van Sant's big word of directorial advice to Robin was, just keep talking. So I imagine at least a decent amount of that scene was improvised. In classic fashion, Robin Williams performed an impromptu stand-up set for the onlookers that were watching the scene being shot and just random attendees who were in the park eating their sandwiches that day. And following his death in August 2014, the bench became a makeshift shrine for fans. Wow, that's crazy. He's been gone for almost 10 years.
I don't like thinking about that.
Yeah.
I still remember where I was.
Oh, me too. Yeah, that was almost like a JFK level, like, oh my God, or like, I mean, I wasn't alive when John Lennon was shot, but like that level, like, Jesus. Oh.
Yeah, we don't really have a good segue for this next part. It's especially personal for me, as I mentioned. This movie introduced me to Elliott Smith, as I'm sure it did for a lot of people, because he was not so much of a known quantity before this. He was kind of a Heat Miser wasn't huge, and I don't think he had really kind of escaped the indie circles, but yeah, I mean, this and not even 10 years later. The soundtrack to Good Will Hunting, scored by Danny Elfman. How do you feel about that?
That's very uncharacteristic, very weird when I like
it's funny that it's not
that.
like it's funny that it's not like full of his like obnoxious
like
augmented
carnival stuff
and augmented diminished harmonies and like his
somebody get their head bashed in Southie like a pipe organ. It's not my fault.
Oh yeah, Danny Elfman, what a weirdo. He's like weirdly ripped.
Him like slamming the phone number on the window to like that.
Just the Oingo Boingo songs. Yeah. Gus Van Sant was like, I really want. He's talking to the editor. He's like, have you heard of this band Oingo Boingo? The soundtrack. Anyway, Gus Van Sant knew Elliott Smith's stuff from Portland. As we mentioned earlier, he had wanted his music in the film that he shot before this, which is called To Die For, but ultimately decided to go for a heavy metal score, but was so taken with Elliott's work that he told Good Will Hunting's editor to which songs he wanted to use before they even started production and before they'd even cleared the songs. He said, I think even before we started shooting, I was thinking in terms of Elliott's music, but I didn't know until finally we were able to put it together whether it was going to work. That was the plan. And I told Pietro Scalia, the film's editor, to use Elliott's music. In the script, it had mentioned that there was world music, and he was trying to make that happen. But we just went ahead and used Elliott's music instead. What do you think that means? Like Rusted Root?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, it was in Matilda like a year before.
I was going to say, yeah. Son of a bitch, stole my line. Bing, boom, bing, 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 bing.
That almost works. Car driving off into the misty distance and then Berkshires.
I would like to
Send me
reach
on my
out
way,
my
yeah.
hand.
I'm very impressed with that. Can you give me Rusted Root duetting with Kate Bush?
Is that or Dave Matthews Band? Can you imagine that?
Ants marching.
Anyway, sorry, go on.
We rigged up our phones once to have them go off every 20 minutes from 4 in the morning until like 6 in the morning with this guy that we knew, and they would go off playing Ants marching.
Yeah. Oh, man. Anyway, Danny Elfman told Tape Op last year in 2022, sitting with Elliot and Gus Van Sant in the basement of Gus's house is still one of the greatest treats I've had. I remember heading out to see Gus in Boston, and he goes, "Look, I know this seems odd, but I'm going to give you a tape. Do you know who Elliot Smith is?" At that point, I hadn't been aware of him. He goes, "I think this will be the only artist in the score for the songs, and I'd like to get your opinion and soak that up." I listened, and it totally made sense. It was such a rare treat. Usually, songs are dropped in at the end. When I'm scoring, I don't even know what they are until I go to the premiere because they've changed 10 times. Here, I was able to take the score and make it go rather seamlessly into the song and back into the score. Van Sant took a copy of Good Will Hunting to his house to watch it with Smith, who loved it instantly and not only gave his permission to use all of the previously released songs for it, but wanted to write an original, which ended up being Miss Misery. And that song was nominated for an Oscar nomination. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the more indelible 90s Oscar memories is a pretty uncomfortable looking Elliott Smith in a beautiful white suit performing Miss Misery with an orchestra, and then subsequently losing, as many did that year, to Your Beloved Large Boat. Specifically, My Heart Will Go On, the love theme from Large Boat. Elliott Smith later called his Oscar nomination shocking and essentially had to be strong-armed into performing an abridged version of the song as part of the ceremony after the producers more or less told him, "We're going to do it, and if you don't want to, we'll find somebody else." God, who would they have gotten in 96?
98. It would have been February 98.
February 98. Who would they have gotten? Let's see.
Darius Rucker. I mean, Dave Matthews.
Savage Garden. Usher. Will Smith. Will Smith was hit number 1 after My Heart Will Go On.
Really?
I'll fake it through the day with some help from Johnny Walker Red. Send the poison brain down the drain to put bad thoughts in my head.
For somebody that you hate this much, I'm surprised how many lyrics you know of his.
No, that was the line. That was from Waltz number 2. I think I was just listening to this earlier today. No, it is Miss Misery. I'll fake it through the day with some help from Johnny Walker Red. Send the poison brain down the drain to put bad thoughts in my. Elliott Smith rules.
He's another one I remember, like, where I was when I heard he died. I wasn't really all that aware of, like, pop culture stuff at that time.
I have to imagine you like him a lot because he's basically the Beatles. It's basically garage, like DIY depressive
Baby
Beatles.
Britain I really liked. Yeah, I liked all the stuff. I liked when he played piano or electric guitar.
He's a great guitar player, man. I still can't play like Angeles.
He did a great cover of Carousel 44 by the Zombies. It was
Have
really
you heard
good.
of Do Because?
Oh, yeah. Was that I Am Sam soundtrack? It must have been.
He would do it live, too.
Whoa.
I mean, yeah, man. That finger picking in Angeles is amazing.
What's the, that like great electric guitar? Oh, So Slow. That's a great track.
So much fawning. Among the objections that the Oscars had were to Smith sitting down to play, which, as everyone knows, is God's preferred method of playing. They wanted him to stand, and this depressive, drug-addicted ex-punk from Portland was sandwiched on the Oscars between Celine Dion and Michael Bolton. He later described the experience as surreal and ridiculous, but he said, "At a certain point, I threw myself into it because it seemed to make my friends happy. I walked out and Jack Nicholson was sitting about 6 feet away, so I avoided that area and looked up at the balcony in the back and sang the song." You imagine you're Elliott Smith, you're probably starting at Jones at this point. You just look up, you see a not amused Jack Nicholson in sunglasses. Just staring at you.
Oh, he's probably very amused. He always just has a permanent smile just like on his face.
Yeah, well, Jack Nicholson's probably also stoned.
No, yeah, yes. I mean, yeah, 100%. He probably thought he was like courtside at the Lakers at that very moment.
This was a really good movie, Elliott Smith told Entertainment Weekly in 1998, before adding, I don't have much interest in branching out into soundtracks in general, though. He did mention that he enjoyed working with Danny Elfman and the 80-piece orchestra, Riley commenting, I was surrounded by perfectly tuned notes instead of my normally untuned guitar. Danny Elfman told Tape Op, he had actually a really funny anecdote about the Oscars thing. He said that Elliott called him and said, Danny, I'm at rehearsal and it's not going well. Bill Conti. Does that name ring any bells for you, Jordan?
That sounds familiar, but I
He's
don't.
the guy who wrote Gonna Fly Now, the theme from Rocky, and also The Karate Kid.
Cool.
That was who the Academy Awards tapped to do an arrangement of Miss Misery.
Oh my God.
That if you need I can't think of a more perfect image of Oscar's cluelessness than being like, yes, finely wrought, deeply emotional, melodic singer-songwriter. Who can we get to orchestrate his big Oscar-nominated original song? Rocky guy. So Bill Conti of Gonna Fly Now fame did the arrangement, and Elliott Smith called Danny Elfman in a panic. And Danny Elfman says he said, oh, so when do you need something by? And Elliott goes, tomorrow. So Danny Elfman, God love him, banged out an arrangement in a day and sent him the music. Anyway, Matt Damon told Cinema Blend in 2017 that he hasn't rewatched Good Will Hunting since the deaths of Elliott Smith and Robin Williams. And then the other thing that he added was the publicizing and subsequent trial of Harvey Weinstein for his years of sexual assault. So, sorry, Matt.
And also a slightly less publicized detail, Harvey Weinstein was also a jerk to Robin Williams as a result of Good Will Hunting. Good Will Hunting was released nationwide on December 5th, 1997. Costing just a paltry $10 million, it brought in a truly astounding $225.9 million worldwide, which is like Marvel DCU stats these days. It's crazy. It could have made more at the box office were it not for some underhanded maneuvering from Harvey Weinstein. Numerous people, including Kevin Smith, have said that Robin Williams had a back-end deal where if this movie made more than a certain amount, I think it was $150 million domestically, that Robin would get a higher percentage of the gross. So Harvey yanked it out of theaters when it was at $138 million to screw Robin out of his higher percentage. Kevin Smith later said, I remember when Good Will Hunting was leaving theaters, and it felt weird because it was like, wait, there's all this Oscar buzz. So why would you pull it if it was just making money? And they did it because keeping it in theaters meant that more of the money would go to Robin, whereas the moment it went to video, the split wasn't Robin heavy. It was hamstrung because of greed. Awesome. In addition to making lots of money, Good Will Hunting also wrapped up a truly impressive 9 Oscar nominations, including ones for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Matt Damon, and Best Actress for Minnie Driver, among several others. Most of the awards, unfortunately, well, fortunately for me, were snatched up by my beloved Large Boat movie. But Robin Williams won his one and only Oscar, which is criminal, for Best Supporting Actor. He kicked off his speech with an amazing opener. For the first time in my life, I think I may be speechless. For some reason, I rewatch that speech I don't know, once a year for some reason, and it's so great. Very touching speech. He thanks everyone from Harvey Weinstein to Matt and Ben, to his late father, but he forgot to thank his mother, who was sitting next to him in the auditorium that night, an oversight that haunted him for the rest of his life. And I guess when Robin won his Oscar for the supporting role, he sent the guy who dubbed his voice in Good Will Hunting in German, named Pierre Augustinski, a small replica of the Oscar statue with a note saying, "Thank you for making me famous in Germany." Most famously, Matt and Ben won Best Screenplay, which lent a whole Hollywood-style ending to the whole affair. You know, 2 childhood friends wearing gifted tuxedos, bringing their moms to the Oscars, making their scrappy friends back home proud. Played very well in the press, and the award was presented to them by another famous cinematic duo, Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, the Odd Couple, which I think is very cute. Ben was 25, Matt was 27, and Matt would later grumble, Ben's still the youngest writer to ever win an Oscar for screenwriting. I'd be the youngest if it wasn't for Ben. F***ing ass. And you know what? That display of ball-busting male friendship, I think, is the perfect place to leave it for today. Both Matt and Ben went on to fulfill their respective destinies in Hollywood. Ben with Armageddon and Matt in Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. And actually, the Oscars had the added bonus of pissing off Steven Spielberg, who, because he wanted Matt Damon to retain his All-American Everyman anonymity for the movie. Spielberg later admitted, "Who knew he was going to go off and become a movie star overnight and win the Academy Award for Best Screenplay and not be the anonymous actor I had in mind?" So, sorry, Spielberg. But Matt Damon always seemed to keep a pretty good head despite his stardom. He frequently would say that one of the upsides of winning the Oscar so young was that it taught him very early that didn't fill any sort of inner void and that accolades really weren't the answer. And he remained self-deprecating about his creative partnership with Ben Affleck, later saying, "If you put us together, you might actually make a whole creative, interesting individual." They did Dogma with Kevin Smith soon after the success of Good Will Hunting, but they wouldn't write together until the 2021 historical drama The Last Duel, directed by Ridley Scott, which focuses on the last legally sanctioned duel in France's history. And I guess an early version of that script had Matt and Ben's character kiss, because in those ceremonies you kiss everyone on the mouth for a duel, but Ridley Scott cut the scene because he thought it would distract from the rest of the movie.
Coward.
Yeah, I know, seriously. I honestly have no memory of The Last Duel, and truthfully didn't know that it existed until researching this episode.
People liked it. I think
Did
it has
they?
good. I think it has a good reputation
Oh.
these days.
But clearly it did not have the impact of Good Will Hunting, which is honestly probably an unrealistic expectation. And Matt Damon agreed. He said in 2013, "I don't think there could ever be another movie that I felt that way about, because of what it meant in our lives, because of that time in our life. Another movie couldn't occupy that much of my heart and soul at this point in my life. A movie could never change my life like that again." And most importantly, much like you and I, Matt and Ben remain dear friends. Ben Affleck said not too long ago, "For a while, we thought maybe we should chill and just do other stuff and not be Matt and Ben. But we have our company together and we're developing together. Matt lives down the street from me just like he used to. The only difference is that we have pools." Not bad for two kids from Boston.
In the end, the real apples were the friends we made along the way. Well, folks, thank you for listening to the 100th episode of Too Much Information. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm still Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time.
Too Much Information was a production of iHeart Radio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.